Good evening. I will now call to order the Special Board of Education meeting workshop for May 1st, 2024. It is now 5 p.m. We are in open session, and could I please have everybody stand for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Apologies for the slight delay. Alrighty, we will move on to consent calendar. Is there anybody who would like to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lando and a second by Ms. Robinson. We are down one member, so we will do a voice vote until or unless our fifth member gets here this evening. We'll start it off with Mr. Tennis.
Tennis, aye.
Dalby, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye.
All right, it passes 4-0 unanimously with one absent. Moving right along, the big topic for this evening is our workshop topic. It's informational, alternative education housing and supporting at-risk students. So I'll go ahead and maybe call it, are we with Pedro? Yeah. Mr. Caldera? Awesome. All right, thank you.
Do we have the clicker? All right, thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think that tonight we have an opportunity to be able to provide you some, what I feel is amazing information of what we do to help our at-risk, homeless, and foster students in our community. I want to especially thank Rebecca Conkin and Tom Lando for being our facilitators for this board workshop. Also want to personally thank Jamie McLaughlin behind me, Mr. Andrew Mall, yeah, right, and then Chase Chevalier for being here tonight. They'll be our speakers and be walking us through this workshop. And so we have some goals here for you today. The main goal is to understand the multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS. You will be hearing this over and over for years to come because this is how we do business in Chico Unified School District. We're going to also talk about the targeted supports that we have for homeless and foster youth. We'll give you a definition about McKinney-Vento and foster rights and responsibilities. And then the Homeless Foster Youth Liaison Program Coordinator position is going to be presented by Jamie. Along with that, she's going to also cover what it means to be a targeted case manager and exactly what they do specifically in Chico Unified School District. And last, we will finish, which I believe is going to be our home run hitter tonight, is going to be Mr. Chase Chevalier, who's going to be talking about our community schools. And he's going to be actually giving us some very special news tonight. So, like I said, I really look forward to tonight. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And anytime I stand in front of you, I want to make sure I express my sincere gratitude for all of your support of Alternative Education Family and to the members of our district administration. So with the slide that you see in front of you, what I really want to point out is the last three words in the bottom sentence there, the communication, the cohesion, and collaboration. Because what we have going on with our multi-tiered systems of support at every site, within their system, they really have the needs of their specific site. But within those tiered systems, it looks very similar on every school site. So between, our DLC reps, our MTSS reps, our elementary, EAC, and SAC, all those groups are collaborating weekly and monthly to talk about the needs, not only that they're from their sites, but collectively as a district. what they're seeing that is working on their sites, what they're seeing is not working, what could be modified and worked on to where every student that is getting those different tiers of support, wherever they move to in the district, whether it's from elementary to secondary or even over to alt ed, all those tiered systems of support somehow mirror each other. So when the students move, either if it's from one elementary site to another elementary site, even the site-specific needs might be different, but those systems of support are pretty similar, and students, it'll look somewhat familiar to them and their families. And so by the time a student does come over to alternative education, we have a very good idea based on all of the documentation and within Aries or EduClimber exactly what that student has been supported with, so we can formulate a different plan, an individualized plan for these students with the wonderful supports that we have on our campus. And that next slide will kind of illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. While it does look similar on every site, it is altogether different based on those different needs. So alternative education is really, again, like I said, all the support we receive, the categorical funding that we receive is really focusing on every single student. And while I used to think that, hey, we're a tier 3 all the way around because we do work with every single student, we still have a tiered system of supports with an understanding of where our students are coming from. So, any questions? Yes.
Thank you. And this just popped into my head. How long do most kids stay with the designation of foster homeless? Are we tracking how long they are designated?
Well, I can speak for when students come to alternative education, if they don't already have that designation, they're identified very quickly. And from my understanding, it pretty much stays with them until graduation and through graduation. Does that make sense?
It depends on their status, status. If they've gained permanent housing, it changes, and I can address that too.
Okay, yeah. Jamie will be able to cover that in a little bit more detail.
She's going to say more
Yeah.
about that? Yeah, because, okay, I'll write myself a note so I still remember my second question when it gets there. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie McLaughlin, and I'm the District Foster and Homeless Liaison and Program Coordinator. Thank you very much for having me today. It's been a while since I've been to a board meeting, so have a good night. When I leave and you're still here, I wish it's short afterwards. Thank you to everybody else who is here. I'm going to go over definitions, and I'll answer your question that you asked Andrew as well. So the first definition I'm going to go over is the McKinney-Vento definition. So in our program, we try to use words like McKinney-Vento or a level of homelessness, and try to, instead of using the words homeless with our students and families when we're talking about different supports in place. So in order for a student to qualify as McKinney-Vento, it's students who are living in a shelter. In Chico, we have 4 shelters that house our families that have children. And we are very fortunate because up and down the state of California, there aren't a lot of cities who have this many supports that house our families that are homeless with children. And some of them are short-term and some of them are long-term, up to 1 year. And with the addition of the Jesus Center Renewal Center, they've increased the supports for an additional 20 families for us. And then the Esplanade House is also increasing their capacity to house families who are homeless with children and low-income families as well who transition out of their program. In addition to those, we have the Aurora North House, who is through the Torres Shelter, and it's more of a short-term capacity for them. And we also have the program through Salvation Army, who also helps supports our women who are struggling with substance abuse, and then once they complete their program, they get to bring their children into the housing environment. All 4 of those environments, I work closely with them and their case managers to make sure that the programs that they're providing and the education we provide are seamless. And I'll go over some of the supports that we provide in a later slide. In addition to the shelter environments, if we have families that live in a motel or hotel in our community, they also qualify for McKinney-Vento. We do have every once in a while, and we try to get them into a shelter environment. We have families that live in either a vehicle or in a tent or on the street. And then not so much an abandoned building, but every once in a while, if we have an abandoned house, we'll have kids or a family that'll take over. And then the last capacity to build for our definition for homeless is our students who are doubled up. They're a little bit lower on the needs because they do have housing that's can be a little bit more stable for some of our families. And in order to be doubled up and be considered McKinney-Vento, it's not by choice. The definition says that they're doubled up because they A, cannot find housing, or B, afford housing in our area. And so if they do it by choice and they could live independently and not be homeless, then we don't consider those families McKinney-Vento. They're not at the same risk factor. Another level of support is sometimes we have, and this is very few, but families who might live in accommodations that are not appropriate to live in, and that could be if they have a place that doesn't have electricity, running water, or workable toilet, then those places would also be. And then also in the definition, has to meet also the emotional, social, but also physical and psychological needs of the students to support the education factor. So every once in a while, we'll get a family who that doesn't meet the needs of the student, and we might classify them if they need additional support. You asked about how long. So how long students stay at McKinney-Vento. So every year we take an assessment of each individual's family. They do data confirmation or they fill out a housing questionnaire. And they give us that information. And so if their living circumstances have not changed, then they're saying that they're still in the same circumstance, so then their McKinney-Vento status will be for the following year. We work closely with our targeted case managers to identify those families who gain permanent housing, and their levels of supports drop at the end of that year. So per McKinney-Vento Act, we continue to provide services as long as they maintain McKinney-Vento status for the duration of that school year that they gain permanent housing. In our area and up and across the state of California, to get out of a McKinney-Vento situation can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Especially post-Camp Fire, we're seeing that some families are in a McKinney-Vento situation for a longer period of time. We do have, we got a few grants that we built some more low-income housings, which we exited quite a few families from. And then there's another apartment complex that they'll be building as well that we're hoping that will exit some more families. So our community does recognize that housing is a crisis situation in our area, and they're bringing in funding and support to house more students and families that are experiencing a level of homelessness.
Jamie?
Yeah.
Do you have any clients that are with the chat?
No, if they're in a chat program, that's not considered McKinney-Vento because that is more long-term, and that's an adequate and it's in a fixed situation for them. Mm-hmm. So McKinney-Vento is more something that's not adequate, not fixed. That means at any moment their situation can change. So whether it's that they lose their housing due to not completing program requirements and they're exited from a program, or if they're doubled up and sometimes to overcrowding, those family situations become volatile, yeah, and then another family has to leave. In chat programs, it's usually one family per house, and they have the room and space per HUD that doesn't go over into overcrowding. Every blue moon, we'll get a chat situation where the living conditions aren't conducive. It's more with the people that live in the house that's making that way. So we work with our targeted case managers and their targeted case managers to help support that family to improve their living conditions in the home.
Would you say that the targeted case managers play the largest role in identifying the McKinney-Vento eligible students?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned filling out forms.
Mm-hmm. So there are different ways of identification for McKinney-Vento. Thank you for asking that question. So one of the ways is the parents can identify their McKinney-Vento status themselves. Another way is a teacher, maybe the student or the parent let the teacher know of their living situation, and then they'll let their targeted case manager know, and then they'll complete the proper paperwork and identification. Also, we've increased, and I'll go over data in another slide, our identification through training. So I train not only our targeted case managers, but I train our admin teams, our school counselors, our transportation department, our special education coordinators, our registrars, and our office managers on McKinney-Vento and the definition. So because of the increase in training and what it means, we've been able to better identify our students who meet the criteria.
Really quick, just so that I understand a little bit better.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information very fast. So, just to break it down, when a family's situation moves from a student qualifying for McKinney-Vento to a more permanent housing situation in the middle of the school year, were you saying, or did I understand right, that we provide services still to those
Yes.
students through the end of the school year?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's per the law, and also looking at data of students and families who experience chronic homelessness. Sometimes they might gain permanent housing, but that could be a temporary situation. They're back in a homeless or a McKinney-Vento situation. So we try to carry those supports for the remainder of the school year so that their gap in supports don't end, and then we reassess at the beginning of next year. So if they do lose those housing over the summer, we're asking them the same questions the next year, just in case.
And it's just students that are enrolled in Chico Unified School District students?
No, this law is for all schools, including charter schools, but I only oversee the Chico Unified
Right,
Schools.
that's what I
Yeah.
meant. Because tied to that question was just at what age, what's the lower limit of age that we are aware of students who
Okay.
are living unhoused?
So part of my role as the district liaison, they added a new law for 0 to 5 identification and supports. And so I go all the way down to 0 newborns, and so I work with case managers who help identify those, especially if they live in the Esplanade House or an Aurora House, to provide those primer benefits. We have a few programs in our community like Help Me Grow, WIC, and other things that do home visits for them, because we're doing home visits for ours as well. So we make sure that they're connected to get those supports, and we also make sure that they're connected to preschool once they're eligible for preschool by age, so that way they're in school as soon as possible. By law, they changed it to 0 to 5, and so I work with our community, our targeted case managers, to help identify those 0 to 5 who aren't currently in school.
Thank you.
Me again.
Okay,
Am I just missing foster kids?
that's the next one.
Oh, okay. I'll ask the question for all of them and when I get there.
Okay. The next definition has to do with foster care. So the state of California used the welfare and institution and child care laws to identify students who are in foster care. So for students in foster care have to have either a voluntary or a court-appointed open case with Child Protective Services or the Juvenile Justice Council. So in order for a student to be considered foster, they have an open case, they have a social worker or a probation officer. Sometimes there's some misconception about the word foster, especially cross-linguistics in other cultures. And so sometimes they identify, same thing in enrollment, that they're a foster, and then I have to look them up or check with the county to make sure that they're foster, or if there's just a misunderstanding in language by the way that they're reading the word foster care. And foster care is a little bit different than McKinney-Vento in the fact that once their case closes, then at that time we check in families to see if they want services to drop at that time or at the end of the school year. So we kind of, because some get adopted and they want their case closed, they don't want to be checked in with as often, and we want to respect that as well. The foster definition also, there's some misconceptions that foster kids live with foster families. Foster kiddos can also be living with their biological families, and that could be through a family reunification or family maintenance. And in our community, I work with not only our child welfare social workers, I also work with our agency social workers as well to bridge the gap in communication for school supports, and also to make sure that it's seamless when it comes to school enrollment or a transfer of school, so that way they're getting their school of origin. And now, like, for example, today I've had like 4 social worker phone calls, so they know me by name and they reach out when they need help support when it comes to a school situation or they want clarification to help with supports for their students on their caseload.
Me again? What's the upper age limit for McKinney-Vento services?
In Chico Unified or in the state?
I'm only interested in Chico Unified. I mean, I
So
love the
Chico
other.
Unified is until they graduate high school. So there is no, it's not an age requirement. Some people think that once they turn 18, they're no longer McKinney-Vento. The definition for McKinney-Vento is while they're still at school. So sometimes we have McKinney-Vento students who are living independently on their own without the care of another adult, and so they can be classified as McKinney-Vento. With those students, it's all case by case as well. We'll check in with them, but depending on their level of need, sometimes we have kids that are independent and don't need a lot of support, and sometimes they're not. Maybe I'm anticipating your next question. There is a new foster mentorship program that we kind of piloted in our area. And so we do have some foster youth that are the ages 16 to 19 who are enrolled in our school district that live in what's called mentor homes. These are homes that don't have a foster parent in the home. They just have an adult, but their parent is their social worker. So that adult is not in charge of getting them to school, making sure they go to school, making sure they have their homework. That's the social worker's job. And so it's just a housing, making sure that they're safe in the home. And so we pilot that program this year, and depending on budget and the governor's budget as well, will be if that program continues in our area as well, because it was on the chopping block. So
I'm still up.
okay.
One of my pet peeves is what happens to the kiddos that graduate, age out. How do they get training for employment? Because they're disconnected from the, a lot of the things that we have, and they're not yet solidly on track to get additional training and supports with businesses and communities. Where do they go? How do they become self-supporting?
Well, I'll answer both questions a little bit separately. For foster youth don't age out until the age of 24. So there's extended foster care. So depending on what our foster youth decide to do after graduation, if they decide to go to college or university, I transition them to the person like me at their college or university. So I have working relationships with Butte College, Chico State, Sac State, and UC Davis, because they're in our local area. That's where our kids tend to go. And we make sure that that communication, the golden handshake, takes place for those kiddos. Also in foster youth, in order to be part of that transitional housing program and extended foster care, they have to either be enrolled in school or have a job. So the social worker, if they're not choosing the school route, their social worker will take on that role to help them with job placement and job skills. Social workers also work with helping them build resumes and those kind of things to help them get to be gainfully employed.
And these social workers are employed by?
So those social workers, they have two social workers depending on which program they're on. So they might have a county social worker if they're just in the SLIP program, but if they're in the THP Extended Foster Care Program, they have a county social worker and they have an agency social worker as well.
An agency social worker? Meaning?
Meaning, like, for example, we have Youth and Families Foster Program, we have Children's First Foster Program. Those are agencies, and they employ their own social workers as part of their foster agency to support those kids in extended care.
I had need to get help for a youngster that had aged out or employment, and reached out to the Department of Rehabilitation at the suggestion of Far Northern.
Yeah, if they have a disability, that'd be a great resource to reach out to.
6-month waiting list.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what we're doing in Chico Unified to help with that. As part of our continuing education program, we looked at our numbers. I think you guys had a workshop with them just last month with Tiffany. We hired a part-time CTE person to help support our students who are struggling, either in being a completer in those programs or struggling to find a program that suits them. And so she looks at kids in my programs as well, so our foster homeless and migrant ed students, and we identify which kids are in a CTE program so we know how to support them, because we want to increase the completion rate for our foster and homeless students, but also trying to see what they need to start in a program. Sometimes they just need a mentor to help guide them and facilitate them. So that's one thing we noticed looking at our data to help provide an additional support. And additionally, talking with Tiffany as well, is we saw a need, especially for students in my program who might not have the parental resources at home to go online at the high schools and see what programs are available. That's what I did with my kiddo. I went online. Let's look at Chico High and see what they have to offer. Let's look at PV and see what they have to offer. So I noticed that when I was doing that maybe students that are in my programs might not have that. And so what we're starting is in the 8th grade is going out and doing presentations for the students so they can hear about what programs are offered at which school. And for the mindfulness awareness of knowing that they might not have that guided support at home, so that maybe they can go home and follow up with their targeted case manager or their school counselor. Also, I heard in the works that also infusing a little bit more of a CTE pathways, maybe like a wheel or something like that, so that way kids are at the junior high level can get like a little feeder of what it might be in a different program to help guide them into B completion. So long story short, your question was, how are we getting them ready for the workforce? That's what we have put our brains together to kind of support, especially our students who are experiencing a level of homelessness or in our foster care system.
Well, keep putting your brains together, because my feeling is it's a huge need. I mean, these are kids that don't have families to move back in with.
Right.
and other areas. So being able to support themselves,
Right.
critical.
Yep. Our next slide has to do with our data. So our data going back to the 18-19 school year, when we experienced the campfire, where numbers were at 7.9. And then the next year, the 19-20 data, and then went down. And then the 2021 data went up just a little bit. And then we have a bump that kind of is steady going up. And I just wanted you guys to be aware that we probably had an underlying amount of students that have been McKinney-Vento foster that just weren't identified this whole time. So it's not like we're increasing in our area. I think we're just finally having the opportunity to have those relationships with our families to where they are identifying themselves a little bit more often. We have the training in place with our school staff and support services that help them understand what it means to be McKinney-Vento. And then we have a person in my role at the district who can help organize as a program globally to put those process and procedures in place. So the state of California, when I talk to our state representatives, they say for our area we should be in between the 5 to 12%, and so I've kept that in mind when I first came along in the 21-22 school year, as okay, that's a baseline where the state thinks where we should be, so I should be thinking, okay, as long as we're there, I think we're looking good as a program and identifying our students who might meet the McKinney-Vento requirements to provide services for those students. And this is end of the year data too. I want to say it's not our census date. So if you go on DataQuest, you might see different numbers. So there's two types of data. There's census state data, and then there's summative data. This is the summative end of the year data, or right now, because we're doing the board workshop for the 23-24.
You look at the bottom line, those are huge numbers.
Yeah.
And the impact on their individual education programs for that many kiddos, you know, it just, my heart aches for that group. We've got as much as I can imagine any school district has that has limited funding. But still, that's an awful lot of kids needing an awful lot of help.
And so those are the kids identified. So I would say, and I'm going to talk about what targeted case managers and what I do in later slides, but I would say some we identify and don't need a tremendous amount of support, and then some we identify need a whole wrap team to support them and embrace them so that they're successful. So it's varied levels of support, but we don't get to determine who's identified and who's not identified. The law determines that. We just determine the level of support needed, and we have a process in place in Chico Unified to make sure we're meeting those needs.
If you could pick where you need more support, that we have something to do with, what would that be? What more support would you wish for?
I would say that through our grant systems, that transportation supports, we have a transportation support that's dropping off at the end of this year. Our EHCY ARP funds were allowing us to get gift cards, not gift cards, sorry, store cards, I forget the term, store cards for things like gas or food or clothing. And that is the only grant that we've ever come across that allowed that, and it's seasoned, and we spent the money already on those types of supports. So I would say moving forward, it's looking at what are not allowables for us to purchase with the grants and the funds that we currently have. It's those kind of things, to where families might need additional support. Speaking of transportation, I'll talk about this later, is we offer 3 levels of transportation. We try to get them right on that school bus or the Beeline, or if those 2 options are not available, then if the person has a vehicle, we've been able to offer that for the last couple of years, and that's increased transportation and attendance for those kids who are on that gas card program.
And when I was helping at Aurora House, and I got to name Aurora House.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was such a need because we had, when I was working with the tourist shelter, having the families with little kiddos was just not the right environment to have them at the tourist shelter. So that's what brought us to Aurora House, and the needs,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll go over what supports we do in place. So I feel like our needs, for the most part, are under control in Chico Unified, but I'll address that in a later slide when I talk about those. Any other questions on data?
I do.
Yeah.
The base data percentages, are those including the 0 to 4 or 5 range?
No.
Okay.
They're not.
I was gonna
It's a
ask because
separate
it's-
reporting period, so.
Yeah, I
when-
figured it'd be tricky.
yeah,
That's why I was
yeah.
like, just making sure.
Yeah,
that-
no, it doesn't include, the only data that reports on those are for our grant. I have to report the 0 to 5 that I help support outreach and identification for. This is only schools that are students that are enrolled in Chico Unified.
Okay, that makes
So there
sense.
might be kids coming up who may be identified once they get into preschool, TK, or
I
kindergarten.
assumed as much because of the percentages. The follow-up question was, have you seen or are there trends in, like, if you break it out by age? If there's kind of an even number that we see of students falling in these categories across ages?
It's pretty
or-
much across the board. We do have dips in 6th grade and 9th grade, and that sometimes is because of the school change, and we've been working really hard to roll over some of that identification of those kids. And what I do is I have a spreadsheet, and then I figure out what school they go to, and then that new targetation knows to check in with that family.
So you think those are false dips?
So I think they're false dips. I think it's pretty even across the
Okay,
board.
we haven't seen like necessarily seen like obviously a rise in general, but
No.
of any particular bubble or age group?
No, and that's the same thing with our supportive housing environments that are housing some of these families and providing supports. Is they're all the way from babies to kids graduating high school. They're seeing the same data as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go over is a couple of slides that talk about the rights and responsibilities that homeless and foster students have. And the first thing that they have, and these are governed by the state of California and the federal government for McKinney-Vento. And so I kind of just merged them together because they overlap for most cases. So students who are McKinney-Vento or homeless have the right to enroll in school. This is for the McKinney-Vento side, without giving a permanent address or proof of residency. So traditionally, to enroll in a school, you have to give those proof of residency, a bill statement of saying that you live in that boundary for the school, and a birth certificate and immunization record. So we work with our school staff and help them to understand that those families may not have that. We ask for it. If they have it, great. Most of our families don't have those things because if they're doubled up with another family, maybe the bill is in the other family's name and it's not in their name, or they don't have services in their name because they're in a supportive environment. So we try to remove that barrier, and we work with our office managers and registrars to understand that as well, so that way they're not getting that pushback. And I always say, if they don't have it, maybe give them the housing questionnaire to find out if you need it or not. So they have the right to enroll in school. Enrollment in school means that you have the immediate enrollment right, but it doesn't mean immediate same day going to school. So we would love that to happen, but if any of you worked in a school system, bringing a kid in, putting him in the teacher's classroom with those kids sometimes takes a little bit of time, and so we want to respect the system a little bit. However, our schools are really good. If I have a student or family in crisis, especially if they are unhoused, then we try to get the immediate enrollment. We tell them that this is your temporary placement until we get the permanent teacher in place, and we do the best that we can to get those support services provided and make sure that they're in a safe environment. The next part is continue to attend the same school, so that's called School of Origin. School of Origin protects our McKinney-Vento and our foster students. School of Origin means where did they go to school at the time that they became a foster student or at the time that they became homeless. So even if they moved across town and their new residence school would be a different school, they have the right to stay in that same school where they have their supports in place. There's been a lot of research and data that supports moving kids from school to school to school, just puts their education further and further behind. So we work really hard with our transportation department, those 3 levels of supportive transportation I was talking about earlier, and to make sure that they can stay in that school of origin if they choose to. We don't force families to stay, but they have the right to stay. So we give them their options and we let them know you have the right to stay if you want to continue to stay, or you can enroll in your neighborhood school if that's easier for you, and that's the parental choice. For our students who are McKinney-Vento, this is within Chico boundaries only, but our foster students kind of expand to Butte County as long as it's feasible for transportation within our school districts and or the foster family that's transporting the students. So we have a county level support, and then we have our school district supports that support the transportation of foster youth who live outside of Chico. Occasionally, we will have a McKinney-Vento who lives outside of Chico that we will support. We try to do that if they're in high school and try to graduate with their peers. They do have the right to stay in there, but transportation can be an issue, and we might not be able to meet that need. So if we can meet the need with a gas card or the Beeline, then we try to make that happen to support that family who wants to stay, especially because sometimes they'll move to Oroville and then move right back, and then they're going to one school to another. But for the most part, most of our families are locally that are McKinney-Vento. Talking about transportation support, so through McKinney-Vento and Foster, we have the transportation application specifically for these children. So our targeted case managers work with families to support the documentation needed for them to get that transportation without having to have an additional cost. And then they also get to have transportation to the school of origin that they were attending before they were foster or homeless. So we coordinate that. And for the most part, our transportation department works magic to make that happen. Occasionally we will have a bus. So another need that just came up is occasionally we do have bus routes that get really full in some certain areas. And so transportation, another bus or a bus driver, if you want to raise money for that, that would be great. But I think now that we have more bus drivers and things in place, that we're hoping that increases, because we had a huge dip during COVID trying to navigate all of that. More rights and responsibilities. So students from McKinney-Vento and Foster get to, enroll in classes while so if there is a dispute or anything like that with their immunizations or their documents needed, they get to enroll in that class until a dispute is resolved. We are very fortunate that our schools, with the training they have and the support personnel in those front offices, along with their targeted case managers, we haven't had too many hiccups. Normally it's like the TCM will call me like, hey, this is happening, and I just call and like, hey, just a reminder. And then the kids, enrolled and going to school. So, but for the most part, we've done a really good job at trying to get families and kids starting schools at the same time and transferring to schools in a timely manner. Our students who are foster get to matriculate with their peers, and so that's kind of nice that even though they might have a foster placement outside of that neighborhood school, if they, for example, if they were in Shasta for elementary, they have the choice to matriculate to Bidwell with their peers as well, even if they're living in a different residential environment. So that's kind of nice to keep those groups together when they would like it. Another part of their rights and responsibilities is to be able to attend classes in the school of choice. I already talked about while we're doing the dispute, but we haven't had any. And then they also get to receive the same special programs and services that are provided to other kids. So we don't discriminate based off of their McKinney-Vento or foster status of whether they get to be enrolled in classes or programs. It's school choice, and they're just like any other kid who's trying to pick classes and figure things out with their counselor support.
Jamie, for the kiddos that have IEPs, who usually becomes designated to be the representative for that child during the IEP?
For foster kiddo or homeless kiddo or?
The ones we're dealing with, the
Okay.
McKinney-Vento,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it depends on who the ed rights holder is. And so if there's a designated ed rights holder, then it's the ed rights holder. So if it's the bio family, then that's who it is. In cases of McKinney-Vento, sometimes the ed rights holder, the bio parents, maybe they're incarcerated or MIA, and the child is with a caregiver. If that caregiver is willing to be the surrogate and take on the rights of ed rights for IEP purposes, we do that. Occasionally, we'll have a McKinney-Vento student that we don't have a family member that they're living with or an ed right holder that we can get a hold of, and we have a process in place to find a surrogate for those students through the IEP process.
Do your ed right people have to go through the training? I know there is a county training for people that are going to act as educational advisors for these kids.
And the special education side, I'm not sure, but in the foster side, yes. So on the foster side, so when it comes to IEP for foster, it's who their ed rights holder are. So some kids are in foster placements, and their parents are the ed rights holders. So it's the parents who would be invited to the IEP and be part of that process. Traditionally, foster parents will accompany as well because this child is leaving the home, and they want to make sure that they're bridging that support between home and school. Occasionally, just like in McKinney-Vento, we'll have a parent or a guardian who is either MIA or their parents' rights have been limited or terminated, and the court appoints who the ed rights holder is, or sometimes if they can't find a person, they'll reach out to me, and we have a list of surrogates for foster kiddos who need an ed rights holder. And if that's the case, and we work on that process, get it through the court, and then that person who is the designated ed rights holder, I send them information about ed rights of foster youth and who the kiddo that they're going to be supporting and some contact information, and then I also let the school know, and then I send them the proper paperwork once it comes back from the court, so they have that as well. So on that side, they get a little bit of training, and then they get some follow-up support with me, and then they have my contact information if they have any questions or concerns for ways of supporting. And we have a pretty solid list that every time I email it out, I think you're on it, I always get a response that day of somebody who can be the ed rights holder for our kiddos. In addition to those supports, we also have nutrition support. So back in the day when Chico Unified didn't provide free meals for all students, these kiddos received nutrition support without having to provide income verification because they were already certified as McKinney-Vento or foster. We continue that process because we never know if that is going to stay or go, and so we just keep it, and we work closely with nutrition services to identify those students as well. Next. So in addition to making sure that our families understand what their rights and responsibilities are, making sure that the people that work closely with these families understand the rights and responsibilities of those students, I have other duties as assigned. So part of it is coordinating educational programs so students, parents, and staff are aware of their rights and responsibilities. I make sure that everybody has the same information. And whenever there's a conversation about either school placement, I just regurgitate the same information and make sure that parents have enough information to make that informed decisions themselves with the support of our schools. And then I also provide McKinney-Vento foster trainings, like I said, to all the people that I talked about, and I also coordinate the All-Star Parent Program. It's a 13-week program that goes over the 40 developmental assets. This is the third year we've had that program. In the third year, we've graduated anywhere from 13 to 17 families. It's my prize baby because not only do we support all families, anybody get to sign up. You don't have to be in a McKinney-Vento or a foster situation, but I do advertise to those housing environments and those foster agencies so that it's another level of support. And our county social workers, if they're working with a family on family planning, they'll say, hey, sign up for this. And then our case managers at those supportive environments, they post the flyers for their families as well. So we do get a fair amount of students who are either in a McKinney-Vento or a foster situation, but we also get everybody else too. And so it's kind of a nice blend of parents who come from parents who have a skill deficit to parents who have skills but want to beef up their skills. And so the quality of conversations we have while teaching those 40 developmental assets has been very rewarding. Part of my job. In addition, I analyze data a lot. to ensure growth in academics, behavior, and social emotional, and then working with reporting those to state and federal programs to ensure that we are in compliance. And so looking at our data, you guys have seen those data points. We do have some data deficits for our McKinney-Vento and our foster students, and I've been working with counseling teams, admin teams, and anybody who will listen to help develop plans of support in place for those students so that they're more successful in school, not only with attendance. So this year through our grant funds, we've beefed up attendance support. So I analyze data. Any student who is McKinney-Vento or foster who is below 90%, we work with a target case manager. They have little punch card system, reward system, home visits to try to support the attendance, and our attendance has been improving. The gas card program, it's in our contract for attendance, and so in order for them to continue to get that kind of support, they have to have an increase in their attendance, so that's helped improve attendance as well because they want to continue to get that support. And then working with our target case managers and our counselors on social emotional, we do the Kelvin surveys as well to get that data to see if that's improving. But sometimes it's a kiddo on the bus, and so I work with transportation, and they say, hey, this kiddo is having a hard time on the bus, and then I work with the target case managers to get things that they can do on the bus so that they have better social emotional skills on the bus or in the classroom. And then the next thing is provide leadership and support to the targeted case managers team. I'm going to go over that in the next slide. But our targeted case manager team, when I came on, we had 13 targeted case managers. And through our LCUP funds, we've been able to double almost that support. So where some schools were sharing a targeted case manager and they didn't have somebody on site every day, I'm proud to say that now every school site has a targeted case manager. All of our targeted case managers are cross-cultural and cross-lingual. So we also saw a need, looking at data as well, is we have an influx of Farsi families, and this year we hired 2 Farsi targeted case managers, one as a district and one at a school site, but we have both a male-female dynamic because in culture in their culture that they speak to the same gender, and so we want to be mindful of that in their process. And so when the hiring process, when we had the opportunity, we snagged both of them up at that time. We also have a Hmong targeted case manager and a Hmong sub-targeted case manager right now, so we meet those needs of those the families that still speak Hmong, and then the rest of them speak Spanish. The next part of, I also facilitate sport for graduation success of all of our students. So Ed Code says that students who are foster, homeless, juvenile justice, migrant ed, and if they're in an English limited learner program, if you have a newcomer program, qualify for graduation requirement exemption. That means that they qualify for state credits. And so making sure that students who are struggling for graduation still have an opportunity to graduate with their peers. So they have to meet certain criteria in order to do that. It's not just given, it's not just awarded, but training with our high school counselors at all of our high school sites so that they know to be aware, and then checking in. I check grades of all of our 12th graders. I start at 11th grade and start keeping that on track, and then I tag the counselors like, hey, how they're doing, can you check in? So that way we improve the graduation rate. Our goal is to improve graduation rates so that students don't need to have a graduation requirement exemption, but we know that students who are in a McKinney-Vento situation or a foster situation, they experience some deficits in education, and we want to make sure that those deficits don't hold them back to further their education if they so choose. I'm also on the continuum of care. So if you are aware of continuum of care, it's the group of agencies who come together for the support of our homeless population. I'm the chair of our Households with Children. I co-chair with Brian Boyer, who is at the Esplanade House, and I'm the note taker. So it's a great opportunity for all of us community agencies who work with households with children to come together and problem solve on a monthly basis. And so we talk about what are the current resources. We have presentations from other agencies to help make sure our skills and we know what's out there to help support our families in a homeless or McKinney-Vento situation. But I thrive in that kind of environment, and it's my jam to know what's available so I can help our kids and families. And so it's been a very rewarding process for me to be on that committee and to be the chair, so I can definitely make sure that all the notes that I want are in it. And then I also secure funding for our programs. So we've been fortunate for This last 3 years that we've got education, homeless children, and youth funding, that's helped support our students' needs in our program. We applied again. We're waiting to hear whether we got that. We got an additional award for ARP that piggybacked on that, and that dropped off. But we're hoping that that funds continue to house like my position to help support the continue my position, and then continue to find other types of supports for all the materials and stuff needed for our program. We've applied for grants for attendance support because we do work on attendance, and community schools grant to help support our students and families that are in those schools as well. Any questions on that slide?
Go ahead. No. On the COC
Yes.
role, are all of the agencies that used to be connected with COC still involved, like the battered women and
Yep.
and that's all still, that
Yeah,
was
so
such
Council
a,
of Children, yeah, we have like we have Catalyst,
Yeah.
we have Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
We have Department of Employment and Social Services, we have the Housing Navigators, we have some school district people, we have chat sometimes shows up. Yes, so the various agencies who support families who are experiencing a level, so we have Aurora House representation, and we also have Esplanade House representation and Jesus Center representation.
that was a powerful group. I really support the breadth of what they cover.
Yeah, and it's nice that we can share those resources, because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know of a new
Yeah.
resource until you go to that meeting and you're like, oh, this is awesome. And then we also get to brainstorm things that are needed, so when they're writing their grants, they can use our
Yeah.
information and our data to help support them to get continued funding for programs that support our families.
And getting help to interagency with grant writing supports. That was another thing that I saw
Yep.
at the table happening very
Yeah,
effectively.
we check in to see if there are any grants on the table that anybody's working on, or anybody needs support, or just a general awareness so other people can apply as well.
A really simple question. Jamie, when did you join the district? Please remind me.
3 years ago. This is my third year.
My mind is exploding right now with how much you do. And I'm thinking
You
about.
should shadow me.
Well, just your presentation alone, like, I'm so in it, but also, like, you just spoke probably an hour and a half's worth of information to us. And
Hopefully not. Okay.
and no, but it really, like, there was so much more context that I didn't understand yet, and you've done a great job presenting it, and just this list of things that you've taken ownership of in the last 3 years is phenomenal. It's really amazing what you're doing, and I'm wondering if there are more of you needed, or, if you need an additional assistant, there's like, I'm just,
Well,
I know
let me
you do,
tell
I do a
you-
lot, I
yeah.
know you're doing a lot. Like,
Let me
that's a
tell
lot.
you the next slide. I do have support. I do not do this alone. Like I said, we have 22 targeted case managers in our district that help support the work that I do. I oversee this program. I do those things that were in the last slide, but a bulk of the work to support our families rests with our targeted case managers. They are the boots on the ground. They are that face-to-face with families. They work with families up until, like, if it's a crisis situation or something that they can't deal with on their own site, then they're reaching out to me for that additional level of support. And so the site supports that I want to brag, this is all brag, because I think it took us a while to get all these things across every school, because when I first started, when it said site supports, it was determined by site, but now these are site supports at all sites. And so enrollment support, transportation referrals, resource referrals. So I want to speak on that because I said I would. Every family or every student who's identified as McKinney-Vento Foster or migrant ed. I say migrant ed, we have a small population, but they're still under my purview. They get checked on by a targeted case manager on an annual basis. They either meet with the family or they call the family to do a resource referral. So the resource referral has a lot of the things that are here that they check in the families, and they check off whether that need has already been met by the targeted case manager of the school site or whether it's still in a need. And so that I oversee all of that to determine, and because I want to close every single ticket that the needs are being met in our community. And so they do that resource referral. Sometimes needs change throughout the year, so they might do an additional resource referral to update me on what the student's barriers are to education. They also provide parenting support, so in addition to helping with the All-Star Parent Program, they come and they teach alongside me. We offer that program both English and Spanish. and we provide childcare and food for them, and it's a very rewarding experience. But they also do home visits and do parenting support either in the home environment or at the school. And then they also do, like I said, the attendance support, interpretation, and work with their wellness teams and their SBIT support, and also ELAC. So they do a lot at their school site to support our students who have needs. Also, they identify what are the community resources that they need further support with. And so the list of those supports are in the middle column. And those are the traditional things, like these are things that we don't necessarily do at our site. They might be doing tutoring and after-school program there, but maybe that they don't fit in that program or they need additional support referrals, so we provide those as well. And then we provide those housing, counseling, and healthcare and legal referrals as well. The last part is where I use a bulk of my grant funds. I use it to support purchasing backpacks, school supplies, health and hygiene items, PE uniforms, and I don't purchase ILP vouchers, but we make sure our families get those. And those are housed, for the most part, at our Alt Ed site. We have a classroom over at Alt Ed who house all these resources, so targeted case managers can go and pick up what the students need and make sure they get it for their families. And we also have a huge clothing resource there as well, so that targeted case managers or students can go and shop for what their needs are. So we work really hard as a team to remove barriers. But wait, there's more, because we can't do it all alone. I also have a social work intern. She's actually here tonight as part of her class. But so I have a social work intern who's an extension of self. She learned very much about our programs, the way I communicate, the way I talk, the laws and stuff that go into it, so our targeted case managers can not only reach out to me, but also our social work intern, and I applied to get a couple more next year. And then I also have, through Chico State College Corps fellows, who also intern with me. So it takes a village to do the work that we do, so it would be nice to have more support, but I think I'm managing enough as it is, and so I think we're in a good place. Oh, yes, finally, I'm done. Any other questions for me?
Yes, actually I do, I'm sorry. Before you get away.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is the training like for case managers, for TCMs?
TCMs get a more in-depth McKinney-Vento training, so they get a lot more on kind of the things that I know, so the rules and regulations and laws and supports that go along with that. We also have monthly meetings where we bring in service providers to do presentations. So for example, at our last presentation, we had Anthem come in and do a presentation on medical supports for our families, and he talked about all the different levels of support to provide that service, and it's for families who have Medi-Cal or partnership, or even newcomers who don't have it yet. And so they talked about all those programs, all the medical things that they provide, and support services, including transportation, so that way our targeted case managers are aware what's out in our community. So we try to have a monthly presenter from the community. We've had Boys and Girls Club come out, we've had Catalyst come out, we've had Anthem, so every month we have somebody come out. And in addition, they also get training in self-care. We do a mindfulness activity at every single meeting because it's important for them to take care of themselves and myself. And so, vicarious trauma through working with this population can be high. And so not only are they learning a new self-care or mindfulness activity, I try to teach them something that also can translate to something that they can do at their school site. And so whether it's meditation videos or little activities that they can do or journaling, they're learning it and then they can go do it. And so we have a whole folder of those kind of activities as well. And then I've also provided some trauma training as well. So part of my background is in trauma and resilience-focused schools, and so taking that information of what I've learned to be a trauma trainer to provide them that level of trauma training that's needed to be successful as a targeted case manager for the long haul.
And on, a somewhat related note, and this is going to sound pointed. I don't mean it to be. I am a huge fan of the TCM program. I recognize they are vital. Yeah. But what are the metrics we use for this program? How do we know if a particular TCM or the program as a whole is actually improving outcomes without taking them away and then putting them back in, which of course we're not going to do?
Well,
So
I would say we started off this presentation of every student every day. So that's our model. So our TCMs don't just work with our foster and homeless. They work with all kids. So looking at the data for what they're doing, we would look at attendance rate data. We can look at their scores. But really, the data I look at to see if we're good as a program is that resource referral. At the end of the year, if I have all those closed tickets and minimal in progress tickets, I know as a whole we worked hard to remove barriers so that student can be successful in education. So in order for a kid to be successful in education, you have to have multiple years of no barriers to see an end product in the academic success of students. And so when you look at academic success, you can't look at case by case, year by year. You have to look at longitudinal data. And I feel like in my role, like we don't have as much data for me to say whether the target case managers, because I don't know how far back, and not every school site had a full-time target case manager. So I don't say that programmally we have enough data to say whether they're effective or not, but I can tell you that every single time that we have those LCAP meetings, parents are constantly saying, we need more targeted case managers, we need their help, they've supported me with this, they've supported me with that. And same thing when we had our foster and homeless meetings, that was the same narrative that the parents were saying. So if we look at feedback as data as well, the parents who are using the services that our targeted case managers are providing are very appreciative, and sometimes we don't have that cross-cultural and cross-language connections at the school site of somebody that looks like them, talks like them, walks like them, and that person is that for them at their school site. And so to take something like that representation away to families, I think it would be a deficit for our families who are working with these people.
And again, I'm not considering anything about him. It's always good to have data to track whether
Yeah.
what we're doing is working. And in a program like this, it is hard because we've not always been great about getting longitudinal data. And that's something we need to remember to keep doing. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yeah, welcome.
I have oh, wow, that's really loud. I had the opportunity when we had our subcommittee. And one thing I was really fascinated by, and I think it might be worth mentioning to our group in case there were potentially any connections in the community, and sorry if it's a little off topic, but when you were talking about providing transportation for all students and coming up with some sort of connection with the public transit system in Chico, are there any updates to where you're at with that? Or
Oh.
is there something, is that something you can share with our group in case there are any potential connections or?
I would say there's not an update. So what I shared there is that I've been working really hard with Beeline to try to see if there's a way to all of our students can use Beeline for a flat fee, just like similar Butte College and Chico State do at the time, and still the time that they are not willing to take on any more at that capacity. But what they did put in place is the token transit program, and so I can electronically send a pass to a parent or a student like that. So if they don't have the 2 to 3 days it takes to go through the mail to the district that they need those passes, they get that immediate pass. And so that was their solution, which I was just as happy with. You know, it would be nice to have any student ride the bus if they need to get to school. But what they are doing is looking at school start and stop signs. So I attended their community meetings last year. John Shepard was in those meetings too, and trying to help with the routing system so that kids can get to school on time. So that is something that we've worked to try to align those as well, and making sure routes are more prevalent where they're close by schools, so that way kids aren't having to walk an extended amount of time to get on a bus if they are going to school, or get off the bus and go to school. So I think that's something we keep in communication with. I have some great partners over there that if I have a question or an issue, I can just email them now. So we're pretty good, I feel like, in the communication part. I would love for them to be able to take us on in that capacity to where any kid just can get on the bus. But we also want to beef up the capacity for public transportation in our community where kids and parents feel that that is an option for them. They did take a suggestion that I brought of having free ride days. And so they have 4 free ride days, and so I try to advertise those out to the schools when they have the free ride days, so that way kids can try out transportation if they want to on those free ride days.
So Beeline's county, and as a government agency, it seems like it would be nice, I guess, or appropriate if BCOE were to get involved and maybe it goes that route to, maybe BCOE can figure out funding to actually make it a countywide
It wasn't a
thing.
funding issue. I threw out funding options that I thought were well above what
Usually it is a funding
they
issue.
would take, and I still got the no from the top.
So
So
interesting.
yeah.
And that's from the top of Beeline?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay.
But as a community support person, if you feel that you, I think
Yeah.
it takes more voices for something like that to change, and I'm the power of one, and, and John has come to those meetings too, so and it's very limited who shows up to those meetings to make change, and so until more community people get involved to see that as a need, I don't see it changing too much.
Are those specific BCAG meetings, or are we like talking Board of Supervisors
No,
level?
BCAG meetings, yeah. I just couldn't remember all those letters.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, they have community meetings throughout the year, and then when they went through their whole, they were doing some regional shifts and stuff like that. One thing that they did incorporate, which we haven't used yet, but they have the smaller bus, and so if there is a route that's not accessible, we can use that route system to pick up a kiddo and drop them off at their school. We just haven't had a family who is willing to put their kiddo on the smaller bus to take them to school, but they did offer, there's two or three pockets in Chico that don't have those readily routes available. One's near Shasta Elementary, I remember that, and one's back behind this area over here. So we just would have to arrange that, but we would also need the parents to be on board for that too.
It's a nice alternative if you have somebody too that wants to accompany their kiddo to school.
So we do provide that. So when we do issue Beeline passes, if the child or student does not feel comfortable riding on their own, we issue a supervisor pass for a parent to ride with them.
Right, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That's why it is a nice thing to
Yeah.
offer, instead of thinking about putting my 4-year-old on even a school bus is kind of terrifying. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for bringing that up.
First of all, thank you all for having me tonight. It's good to see everyone here again. I know it's been a while, but my name's Chase Chevalier. I am the Community Schools Coordinator for Chico Unified. That's a little better. I know I look like I might have been a front man in a band, but I'm never playing with the mic too much. That's Mr. Andrew Mall's task. So I know Mr. Caldera promised a home run at the end of this, but I haven't hit one of those since 7th grade T-ball. So we're just going to have to run with this one tonight. Chico Unified last year applied for a community schools planning grant through the state under the California Community Schools Planning Program, Partnership Program, and we were awarded a 2-year grant of $200,000 to plan out an implementation phase and create an implementation plan for implementing the California State Community Schools Partnership Program framework at our schools. And so to qualify for the Community Schools Grant, you have to have high unduplicated student counts. And as we all know, those are fancy words for our foster youth, our English language learners, and our students from free and reduced households. So we're really, the state is really targeting high needs at all of our schools. But because it's such a competitive program, we had to choose. This is a new initiative. There's not a lot of models to look upon. You might have seen some commercials on TV advertising things that are happening in Alameda County and LA County, where they have massive facilities, open warehouses, free buildings to put clinics and things on their campuses. We live in a more rural state, even though the state does not qualify us as rural under grant programs, which is another interesting point. But we're not going to go there tonight. So what we've done is I've spent the last 6 or 7 months condensing this 2-year planning phase to work with the 7 schools that we targeted with the highest unduplicated student counts. Those are Citrus Elementary, McManus Elementary, Chapman Elementary, and the 4 alternative ed programs. Oakdale, Fairview, Academy for Change, and the Center for Alternative Learning. And so one of the 4 cornerstones of this program are essentially extended learning opportunities for students, integrated student supports, community and family engagement, And, oh my God, I just had a brain fart on that one. Anyway, so the framework sits within the multi-tiered systems of support. So we recognize that a whole child needs to have their needs met in order to be successful at school, and that's what this whole program is about. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was a little bit aware of what we were doing. So we did all the planning, we worked with all the school administrators, we worked with the families, our community agencies, we came together in planning meetings, steering meetings, and came up with a plan for what we wanted to do. And then I did the back end work with Michelle, our grant writer, who's amazing, and this program wouldn't be happening without her. And so the home run that was promised was, we received on Friday an email from the state that says we have been awarded preliminary status to receive $6.3 million over 5 years to support community schools at our school sites. And again, I'm not used to the standing ovations either, so stop it. So we have been given that money. It needs stamp of approval from the state next Wednesday on the 8th. I've been given reassurance from the county. There's probably not too many reasons to worry about it, but again, we don't want to cash a check before we've been given it. So we're really excited to be able to do that, and we have a lot of cool things in the pipeline for our school sites to really support student success in Chico Unified. Questions? Because I know, Ms. Robinson, I think you have a few. Well, I've sat down with Ms. Robinson and we talked, so I know we do.
Boy, at this point, I think we probably already asked and answered most everything about how we're going to get this going. And I just, yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited.
What is assuming the stamp of approval next week, what does the timeline and launch look like?
So we have to close out the planning grant because it was a 2-year thing. It was kind of like a skyrocket thing. So we have to close out any leftover funds in the planning grant by the 30th of June. We have to fill out an expenditure report to say how we spent our money this year. And then once they've approved everything we've given them on those things, the check clears and it's sent our way and we can spend that funds. But in the meantime, what we're planning on doing as soon as we do get state approval is one of the things that our school sites we're looking at predominantly and overwhelmingly supported by the families in the community. We're school social workers at our campuses to support everything that Jamie and her team does with targeted case management, but we want to just like inject that with some rocket fuel to really get the support that only a social worker can really navigate. And so we're going to start interviewing people and ideally have, if this all goes through, things like that ready to go.
That's really exciting. It made me tear up. Sorry, I don't have any more words.
Oh, I know, it's astounding.
All right, thank you.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Thanks for the good news.
And one last thing, I hope that tonight you got to see extremely passionate educators that truly want to do or make a difference in the lives of all our students. And they represent Chico Unified School District. So thank you, board, for the passion you guys have also shown to be able to support all of everything that we do. So thank you.
Feels like such an odd place to stop.
Actually, as a point of privilege, I might request
Sure.
a quick 5-minute
Oh, okay.
recess.
Yeah, we will just do a brief, let's make it 10-minute recess for personal privilege. So we'll bring it back in 10 minutes, and then we'll move on with our discussion action calendar 4.1.1.
Oh, my gosh. Uh,
Alrighty, we're back on. Thank you for the recess. We will move on to so we're moving into discussion action calendar. Item 4.1 under board. Item 1 is discussion action, review of Chico Unified cell phone policies.
Thank you, Ms. Daubly. If we could pull up the presentation, Tyler. Thank you. All right, so we're going to be talking about the cellular device policies for us tonight. If I can, sorry, I got my clicker. The agenda item was brought to us. Mr. Tennis moved to place an item on a future agenda to discuss possible policy changes regarding to the use of cellular devices on school campuses. It was seconded by Ms. Conkin, and the motion passed 5-0, and that's what we're here tonight to kind of talk about, the information that we can bring to you guys for tonight on cell phones. Things that we'll be covering is our current board policy. Right now, we do not have an AR, administrative regulation policy for that board policy. Well, that's something we can talk about also tonight. And what's our site practices and policies when it comes to cell phones. All right, our current board policy, if I could open it up. Oh boy, that's some small font, so I'm going to, I have it up on my thing, okay. One thing that I want to bring to us tonight, because when we're talking about cell phones, thank you, our board policy, what I really want to bring us down to is the third paragraph down, which is actually the ed code when it comes to cell phones. It says mobile communication devices shall be turned off during instructional time. However, a student shall not be prohibited from possessing or using a mobile communication device under any of the following circumstances. The one that we, right now is in our board policies under that 48901.7. In the case of an emergency or response to a perceived threat or of danger, when a teacher or administrator grants permission to the student to possess or use a mobile communication device, when a licensed physician or surgeon determines that the possession of or use is necessary for the student's health and well-being, and when possession or the use is required for the student's IEP. So when we're discussing cell phones, we know that the ed code says that we have to be able, the student has the right to have it. And I just want to make sure that you guys know on the number one, when it comes to in the case of an emergency or response to a perceived threat or of a danger. So if we are in some type of lockdown event, our student has the right to have, per the ed code, the cell phone. All right, so if we can go back to the presentation. That's our board policy when it comes to this. Current practices for the elementary. Again, these are current practices since we don't have an AR. These are practices when we talk to our administration, but also an AR would be, to that board policy, would make it more tight. But right now, cellular devices must be kept in backpack anytime the student is on campus at the elementary level. Junior high, cellular devices must be turned off and put away from the first bell to the last bell. Students may use devices before and after school. High school, cellular devices must be turned off and put away during class time. Students may use devices on campus during non-class time, passing periods and lunch.
Can you explain better cellular devices?
Right now, it's just cell phones, but one of the things we'll have to talk about is the watches. You know, if you have some type of Apple Watch or something else that's connected to your phone. Also, if you're talking headphones, you're not allowed to have their headphones on, listening to music or anything like that on campus too. That's what, right now. When it comes to what happens to each student when they violate one of these things, that's right now where we would like to make it tighter in an AR moving forward. But it's different from school site to school site if we're talking to administrators. Okay, next one. Cellular device issues on school campus issues, talking to people, inappropriate picture taking, filming of inappropriate activities such as fights on campus, illegal recording of teachers or others, social media usage, student distraction from instruction. And no by any means, I just want to be able to say that Ed Services or myself would say that we don't think that cell phones are a distraction or possibly addictive to a lot of our students or ourselves. So I'm not here to dispute that they're a distraction on our campuses, in our classrooms. There could be.
Why didn't you put that on the list? You did, the last bullet, student
Student
distraction.
distraction from instruction.
Do you think this list is comprehensive?
I mean, we could probably be listing more
There's
on
one-
there. We're just being more of a wide range of what we think that, when we talk to different people, what's going on in classrooms with the cell phones. That's what we come across are the major ones.
Do you think that cheating should be on the list?
Well, that would be also student distraction, but yes, we, like the state testing, they can have them out, they can have their watches out. They shouldn't have them out during tests. If somebody's going to Google for an answer, sure. That's something that the classroom management of a teacher during a test would be, cheating would be one that they can use their cell phones for.
Be a good one to add.
I can tell you from my own past experiences as an administrator, a kid might take a picture of a test in class, send it to their friends who might have that same test later on in the day. So we were having to be very aware that possibly that we were giving multiple different types of tests. So kids might be taking a different one from class to class. Because I know if I've had to deal with that as an administrator.
I kind of feel like pornography should be on the list.
I think we were thinking that was inappropriate social media usage.
They cannot get to it if they're on our Wi-Fi, but if they turn off our Wi-Fi, they can get pretty much on anything on their phone, on their internet, on the phone, if they turn off our Wi-Fi. But that could be an issue, I guess.
Yeah, so inappropriate online content could be an issue that is
Yes.
listed up there. Something else that's not listed is the research that's come out over the last 5 years about the impacts of cell phones on students, academics, mental health and behavior on schools, and how different policies demonstrate what may be what's best for kids in terms of cell phone policies. So there is a growing body of research behind cell phone use or cellular device use and accessibility on school campuses as well.
I agree. Potential policy changes, consideration, enforcement, discipline, defiance, impact on teachers and/or instructional time. Knowing that, as we've talked before in a previous board meeting, when it comes to discipline, remember if a student is told to put their phone away, and they say no, that's defiance, which we can no longer suspend on. But we can give them, the teacher can obviously use their right to have a student out of the classroom for 2 days per ed code, or we can put them in one of our reset rooms, Saturday schools, detentions, and those types of things. Management of phones, liabilities. We got to be careful when we are taking phones. This happened in a situation where now we try to have them put in school safes, but if a teacher takes a phone and puts it in their desk and it gets stolen out of that desk, we are liable for that phone. The school district is, since we took it from the possession of the student. I've had that happen also as an administrator. Parent-guardian contact in case of an emergency, and potential costs or limitation and to monitor if we change. Current policy options and approaches taken by district. Current Chico Unified policy stated earlier, no cell phones on campus. I said that's going to be very difficult per the ed code. Checking cell phones with teachers. Again, and I'm going to kind of go deeper into that a little bit when we start talking about that. Cellular devices put in pouches and carried by students. And also checking cell phones with teachers, the bullet before, I would say check in with cell phones with teachers and put in the pouches in the classroom. That would be the thing that we would suggest. So, I know what we mean by that the pouches would be already in the classroom, and then the student would have to put them in the pouch on their desk or in the possession of the classroom, versus giving them to them where they're walking in. An option when when we're talking about cellular devices put in pouches and carried by students, that means when they walk onto campus, let's say we have 3 gates that they can get into, we'd have 3 campus supervisors at the gate. They'd have to show that they opened their pouches, put the cell phone into the pouch. We would close it, magnetize it to close. Then the student would keep it on their person all day. Versus another one, as we checked, San Mateo does it that way. When we talked to Las Vegas, when you asked me to talk to Mr. Gunderson, I talked to him about it. When they did it in Vegas, every classroom had a set of them for the students to put them in the classroom. And then when the class was over, they were demagnetized. Student took the phone out and went on to their next classroom.
Mr. Marchant? Did you say that, kind of skimming over the second bullet, no cell phones on campus, did you say that might pose some kind of problem for ed code? Can you explain that again?
Yeah, again, the ed code says, if we go back, it says on the, in our board policy, let me open it up. Tyler, do we still have that open?
I guess it confused me that we were looking at the board policy. But
Our
you were
board
referencing
policy,
ed
but
code.
if you read that third paragraph, that board policy is written off of ed code. And so ed code 4801.7, and on number 1, where we all know if we have the other one saying if it's per the IEP or per a doctor, or an administrator says you can get out because we're going to do something with your phone in class, those are all reasons. But number 1, or in case of an emergency or in response to a perceived threat of danger, a student has the right to have their phone.
So is it also part of ed code that mobile communication devices shall be turned off during instructional time?
If you look up, it says, the governing board recognizes smartphones and we can have them off. And we can tell them even in the pouches or in a backpack or wherever we decide that we want them to put their cell phone, we can tell them they have to be off.
I think what Mr. Tennis is asking is because that paragraph starts with mobile communication devices shall be turned off during instructional time. Is that part of one of those 2 ed codes that in that paragraph that are cited?
Is that the law?
That's what ed code states, word for word on point 7.
All right, thank you.
Well, that's very, if that's true, if the law really says mobile communication devices shall be turned off during instructional time, then that's something that we should make a big deal out of as we have this conversation.
You can stand it.
We focus on the following sentence that starts with however, and that however is what opens it up to those line items. So a student shall not be prohibited from possessing or using a mobile communication device under any of the following circumstances.
An emergency.
Emergency is one of
Or if the
them.
administration or our
Correct.
doctor is telling them to.
Correct. And/or teacher, right? And/or IEP.
We're not, no, I don't think anybody up here wants to keep a child from, using a cell phone that's on their person in the case of an emergency where it would be helpful for them to do that, in response to that event. But I'm saying that if the state law, if we're understanding this, says phones should be off during instructional time, I just think that deserves a really big highlight and underline. That's all.
With the actual number A on that, it says the governing body of a school district, a county office of education, or charter school may adopt a policy to limit or prohibit the use by its pupils of smartphones while the pupils are at a school site or while the pupils are under the supervision and control of an employee or employees of that school district. So you can say that the phones have to be off.
But the ed code's not saying that they have to be off.
No, it just says they have to be available for those reasons. But a board can adopt that policy.
Before we get more into what other folks are doing or what could be done, can we back up to the first slide that breaks out elementary, middle, and high school, please?
Yeah.
So this says current CUSD practices, meaning that at each school site at those levels, this is generally the rules that are in place.
Yes.
But do we know to what degree the rules are being followed, or those are being implemented, or how it's being implemented, or how there's accountability for that?
No, I mean, we're not going to be able to, again, if we have an AR that says this is what we'll be doing, we're just trying to tell you this is what our practices are. Am I telling you, I can't tell you, for sure everyone's doing that. It's kind of like, this would be my analogy, if we have a hat policy where you're not supposed to wear hats, do I know that everyone's not wearing a hat in a classroom? Because some people might allow them to have them on or not. I'm just telling you, this is what we're saying that we are using as our practices on our sites. So I'm confused on what you're asking me. Are all of our administrators or all of our teachers following these?
No, I think what I'm asking is just anecdotally, what we've been hearing from staff is that this is not what's happening on campuses.
I think for elementary, like the only way we know how much things are not being followed is if it ends up being entered in Aries or an EduClimber as a situation or as a discipline kind of thing like that. So it's hard to tell the inverse of that, like how much is it being followed? We only kind of know how many times it's being a problem labeled in there with it. So it's kind of difficult.
And when I did ask for that data from EduClimber, unfortunately, we said electronic devices, which also includes our Chromebooks.
Are we splitting that out now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we are, and
Can you explain that a little bit better, what that means for everybody?
yeah, and so what Jay's talking about is minor discipline entries into EduClimber, which fall under the same constraints that I'm about to talk about with general rule enforcement around the sites. Is it depends on somebody putting it in. Are people observing students using cell phones when and where they shouldn't be and not putting it in to document the discipline issue? Absolutely. That happens.
Who's responsible for entering that stuff into EduClimber?
That would be teachers. And so additionally, anecdotally, in talking with our math DLC, who was the only group that we've met with since our meeting with Ms. Dalby last week, we do hear anecdotally around campus that enforcement is not as consistent as it could be. We've also heard from teachers that the backing of an administrative regulation could possibly help with that enforcement, meaning that the district comes out with a clearly stated expectation for school sites to fall back on as they are enforcing the rules around cellular devices.
For folks who may not be as familiar with policies versus AR, can we just kind of recap what it means to have a board policy without an AR?
Yeah, board policy, in this case especially, essentially outlines how the board expects staff to implement education code in most cases. It's generally fairly broad, and general statement and administrative regulation is how we carry that out on our campuses.
And our task is to pass the board policies, and your all's task is to develop an AR typically.
Right.
Exactly. So things would be, what would be the first offense, second offense, third offense, those types of things if a student continued to use their cell phone on campus. So it would be more universal. Like I'm telling right now, without that AR, each school site is kind of trying to figure out what they're going to do with it all, right? I would like to work with, again, staff about what would be, we've looked at other ARs from other school districts, and start from there. I'm not going to just make up different things, but, we've had it where first offense, bring it, put it away. Second offense, it could be, you run it down to the office, pick it up after school. It's in the school safe. Third offense, parent has to come get it after school so we can have a conversation with the parent. I'm not saying that could be the second one, whatever we decide it could be. I'm just saying that's what an AOR would do, so everyone would know at each level, elementary, junior, and high school, what those steps would be if the continued abuse of using of a cell phone on campus.
Staff, students, and
Parents, yeah, would know.
And it seems like, just from anecdotal input, in the classroom, teachers are already pretty overloaded and overwhelmed. They're not going to take so much time to collect everybody's cell phone and enter it into EduClimber. So we really don't know how bad this issue has become, besides the feedback we get from staff, essentially. So, I mean, it would probably be beneficial to have a good idea of what that means, besides EduClimber.
Okay, so we started looking at different things that we could do in the future, and one of the things that Ms. Dalby had, when we started first talking to different districts, how they're handling this, and Ms. Dalby reached out to, then our team reached out, and we had a meeting with their called Yonders. This is what most districts that have some type of policy where they're putting them in pouches, they're using this device to put them. So I don't know if you've ever been to a concert or anything like that where you've had to do this. I've had to do that where you've had to put it into one of these pouches, and then they open it up when you leave, so you can't video or have that type of thing in an event. So basically, you put the phone in, it snaps, and it's done magnetically. It holds. And the only thing that can undo it is this magnet that they're showing on here. So what we talked to district who has them at students, they roll them out at the end of the school day. When they're going out the gates, they hit the magnet, and it pops the pouch open. And the same thing, we would need them in our classrooms, the magnets. Every classroom would need a magnet just in case there was some type of emergency, so we could open up the pouches for the students to text their families or whatever, to let them know that they're doing okay. So that would be another cost. So I just wanted to make sure this is what that we saw on the research, what people are using. And I kind of want to just kind of go over what those costs would look like if we did that. So we're looking at different types. If we did it grades 4 through 12, which is about 8,700 students, cost per pouch is $25. It would be $221,000, about $222,000 just to buy the pouches and the magnets.
So that's the startup cost.
Startup costs. We would need extra ones. We would need replacements, replacement magnets, and all the different things we would need to find out how many magnets we would need around campus. If we just did it for middle and high school, it would be about 6,900 students, and that startup cost would be $185,247. Just high school, as we saw, that would be $120,000 cost, startup cost. Middle school, only about $79,000. If we are going to buy these pouches individually, they're $30 for replacement cost. If we went to a per classroom, the cost would go up. As you can see, if we started in 4th grade, then 5th grade, junior high, and high school, the cost would go up to about $388,000 startup cost.
Is there like a generic one available from Walmart or something like that?
We've been looking and scouring. There is some, John's got a little thing in a box over here. I don't know if I'm going to have him show you how it works. We were able to, unfortunately, find on Amazon, not me personally, but John Vincent, a magnet that a student could buy personally for $30 to open up the pouch. So, but if we have a generic pouch that we can buy, I'm sure that we could sew something together, maybe a little bit cheaper, but it's not going to work as effectively as what we've seen. And I'm just messing with you, Matt. But no, this is the cheapest one that we've been able to ask, and asking districts around what they're using. And this is the one that so far pretty much this group has used. Other things in consideration for cost. Let's just say we were having them, each student had one at the gates. I was just talking to one of our junior high principals today. They have 3 campus supervisors in the morning to watch the cafeteria, hallways, different parts of the campus. They have 3 gates to go in. We would need additional staff to monitor this usage. So we would probably need for that school an additional 3 campus supervisors just in the morning for that hour and a half to monitor them going in the gates. Other hidden costs would be pouch replacements. All other things right now, when they sell you these pouches, there's no way to scan them. There's no barcode on them to say who they belong to, what pouch. one was lost or one was found, we'd be able to open it up and try to figure out if the phone, unless it was turned off. But other than that, we have no way to monitor the pouches themselves. And of course, additional magnets. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Different ways that we can do, we believe, through additional costs would be the pouches, or we can tighten up our ARs and support our staff more when it comes to, or develop an AR that was tight to develop.
Before we move into a discussion period, there's a speaker card, so a speaker request, but also before I call for our speaker, are there any further questions from the board for staff?
I do want to say, talking to districts, some of the things that they have to still deal with, kids putting their iPhone 8 versus their 11 in that pouch. They drop that in the pouches instead of their actual phone, so not knowing which phone that they actually have, or they say they don't own a phone, that type of thing. So again, it would be more if the kid puts the wrong phone into the pouch and then we catch them using it, it goes back to what the AR would be for discipline if they have two phones.
I've got a question for Jacqueline Kruger, our financial whiz here at Chico Unified. So round numbers, $250,000, initial startup for the pouch concept. And then are you seeing like a yearly cost at a certain level, or what are your thoughts on that?
So we would definitely have replacement costs, much like the Chromebooks, they get damaged, they get lost. I think the other big piece here is not just the pouches themselves, but the staff time related to checking to make sure they're locked and unlocked. So it's more campus supervision time, it's more administrative time to ensure. So that would be an ongoing, not just a kind of a sunk cost of buying the pouches one and done, but you'd have the replacement pouches, just like we have replacement Chromebooks, but you'd have ongoing staff time related to monitoring this.
And then the staff time, this not necessarily for you, but feel free to.
Yeah.
In a more of a, like an AR option, which, where you're sort of establishing rules that you're gonna enforce, right? This is gonna be tough stuff for some people. Is that gonna take a lot of staff time if we tried to quantify what that might entail?
I would think, like Ms. Staley just said initially, again, I believe that we have, just like we were shown in our discipline day, we have a percentage of our students that do the right thing, and then we have a percentage that don't, that will continue to try to do workarounds or sneak it underneath their table or whatever, of the desk. But initially, if we're going to come down on hard, anything on a change of policy, we'll have initial more work for staff.
Thanks.
I think, to your point, maybe the onus on which staff will be spending more energy and resources would be shifted from classroom staff to, more like the site level or our campus supervisors who are there for that type of work anyway. So I think that's just something to consider, maybe.
Well, it's still going to generate probably from the classroom teacher, right? They're going to be the ones that see the cell phone out. And certainly, during passing periods, that's going to take everybody out and enforcing, if that's the direction we go, that they cannot be out during passing periods. But the use that happens during the classroom, that onus would still be on the teacher to report that.
Mm-hmm. And what's to keep a student from needing to use the restroom just so they can check their phone? Which happens all the time.
Well, our students will even tell you in our student LCAP meetings, they've told us that, kids are in the stalls, using phones. Again, if we give them a pouch, again, I think a certain amount of students will purchase possibly the magnet to take them out of the pouch to go into the rest, or a burner phone or another phone, to be able to use. I'm not saying there's any easy answer here. This is about making sure kids are doing the right thing. And if the pouch is another layer that to put them in on the desk or in their backpack, that we can do that on the direction of the board.
Madam President, if I can just add from a staff perspective, like many other things, if there's a culture of enforcement with a document or an AR, or even more specified steps that are consistent across the district, I think that would strengthen the culture, the willingness of a staff to know that it's going to be supported, may take some of the onus off teachers and put that onus on other staff for the enforcement, not the initial acknowledgement, but the enforcement. I know we talked before about that culture and the peer pressure of teachers knowing that it's going to be supported. And we've seen that take place with tardiness and attendance. We've seen our attendance rate go up this year so far, knock on wood. So I think we could see that with a strong AR with very specific steps.
Did you guys note that some countries have banned cell phones in schools of late? These include, I'm just looking online right now, Britain, France, Finland, some pretty impressive academically countries doing it. So we're not alone in our teachers are not alone, I should say, and we're hearing from them, by the way. Anyone out there who's listening, we are hearing from teachers, and I haven't had a single teacher write to me saying that they think we should back off this issue and that cell phones in class are fine.
And we would agree with that.
So there's a strong case to be made for taking up this issue, and I'm thankful that we're bringing it up, and let's keep talking about it and maybe do something about it.
And we're going to continue to have to work. It's not just a cell phone, it's the smartwatches also.
Yeah, I think any energy that we maybe can put into this issue is going to be paid back in dividends when we see improvements to our student engagement and more buy-in to there's the social aspect of being at school, anxiety, depression, all the things that our cell phones and social media are impacting in our students. Academic performance will follow suit, behaviors will follow suit. I think that it would be an investment, and how we get there is going to be important, because if we make it so that it's too much of a lift for a specific group of staff and not a more equal lift for everybody, enforcement is going to wane, and we're going to be back at square one, and have put in energy and then not see the return on that investment. Does anybody else have questions?
Madam President, can I add one more thing?
Please.
Going back 16 years to the implementation of Athlete Committed, one of the huge benefits that still exists from that program is the excuse angle. Kids have the ability to say to their friends when they don't want to participate in something they shouldn't, to remind their friends that they're an athlete, and if they have extended circumstances, for example, they could be removed from games or whatever the excuse is for them not to participate, just to have an out. And if we had an AR that was consistently enforced and there was a culture of enforcement, kids would have that out. They would be able to say, sorry, man, don't text me, right? I know that sounds far-fetched, but if we can create that culture, it would definitely benefit the social emotional wellness of our kids.
It carries into the professional world too. I have two phones. I have my personal phone and a work phone, and it's nice when I can ignore one because I'm doing the other, and having those boundaries, and it's that's something that would be beneficial to teach to our students as well. And I should say, just to remember that our students, until they're in their 20s, their prefrontal cortex is not developed. And having the ability to self-regulate is really not solidified until you're in early adulthood. So, to expect that a student is going to take take a responsibility every time to not look at their phone if they hear it go off, or not check it every 10 minutes to see if somebody liked their post that they put on TikTok or whatever, is kind of outside the bounds of their brains developmentally too. So just things to keep in mind when we talk about, self-responsibility and, having high expectations for students, but not giving them the tools that they need. And to your point, Mr. Shepherd, demonstrating boundaries, I think is a good tool to teach our students, and this is one of the ways to do it. So thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions, comments for staff? Alrighty, well, we do have a speaker. Our speaker is Michelle Cooper, and on her way up, just a reminder that it's a 3-minute limit, and you will hear a tone at the 30-second mark, and now we have a timer up on the board for you to visualize your time, and your time will start whenever you're ready to speak.
Okay. Well, just like to point out that I use my phone for my notes to so they are helpful. My primary concern was the safety of our children and them being able to access phones in case of emergency. So I'm really happy to hear that our ed code supports that. I know that is a fear for a lot of kids. I've talked to several teenagers, and the first thing they say when you tell them you want to take their cell phone away is, what do I do in case of emergency? And I think that we have to stop and think that our kids live in a world today that we didn't live in as kids, where the fear of a lockdown, of some major disaster at school is real for them. So I'm just happy to hear that we're not going to take away that safety aspect for our kids. I totally agree with what Mr. Shepherd was saying. I'm an HR professional. Whenever we have a new policy developed, I love putting it into a handbook or a policy that everyone can fall back on and say, you know what, this is our policy, this is what we abide by, the rules apply for everyone. And so I just think that our current policy is adequate, and then adding the AR would be super helpful, just to empower our teachers and our staff to be able to enforce these rules that we already have in place. I think that we need to teach our kids responsibility with their devices. But, we have to also remember that technology use for students is the way of the future. It's not going away. I just really think that we should be teaching them responsibility with it, and that the rules are the rules, and that we do enforce what we say we're going to. So those were just my thoughts. One last thing, when we're talking about how this could possibly cost us upwards of $400,000, and we're looking at that dollar amount, and then we're saying, but we can't afford to fix our schools or fund certain programs in our schools, I think that's a little lopsided. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Just given that we have a little bit of time, is there anybody else who would like to address the board on this?
Well, good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I didn't prepare a speech, and sometimes it's better that way. I'm here to support Ms. Conkin and Mr. Tennis with this policy. I understand emergency happens, and I understand there are kids with medical needs, but I just don't understand how we were able to handle it in the past. I mean, we didn't have cell phones in the past. So I think what we need to do is equip schools, teachers, instructors, and everybody who is who is at school with the kids, with the tools they need to react in case of an emergency. Give them the tools, prepare them, instruct them on how to help a kid when this kid is in distress, right? We all know cell phones are great for many good things, but they're also really bad, and especially at school. And with me having 5 kids, they are more of a distraction. So I am glad you brought that to the board, and I hope we all can work as a community to find a solution for this, because I think it's more of a distraction than anything else. And spending $400 on cell phones, just like Michelle said, when we don't even have money to improve our schools and to improve our reading, English, and math programs, or for reading tutors, then I think that's a little bit too crazy for me. But that's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional requests to speak, how do we want to move forward, board?
Madam President, I've been silent, but it isn't because I don't agree with everything that's been said and with all of the input we've gotten from staff at the school sites. The problem is finding a way to change longstanding behaviors, because, our kids have had access to cell phones for, 10 years at least?
Way more than that.
Has it been more than that? Oh, my God.
I don't want to age myself, but I had a cell phone as a sophomore in high school, and that was 20-something years ago now. 22 years ago.
Well,
It's been a while.
I think that there's been some good things said from administration, too, that one of the issues is providing support to our staff who want to make a change in their classroom by saying, beginning of the period, bell rings, okay, put those phones off and in your backpack. For some staff, that works. And I'm not going to sit in judgment of why it doesn't work for others, but I do know that my kiddos that had Bidwell wouldn't have dreamed of not putting their cell phone in their backpack turned off during class. It just, you did what the teacher asked, or, you were going to get growled at. And there were a couple of staff that, I know my kiddos did not want to get growled at. And I also think that if we provide a structure for staff to be more effective and communicate with our parents, to have them back the teachers with, messages that, hey, don't forget to put your phone in your backpack when you get into class. That parents, they understand, we all live with the distraction of the cell phones. Sitting at a table with a family that has 2 or 3 kids with them, not a word is spoken between the kid and the parent because there's a cell phone at the table. And that hurts my heart. I don't have an answer other than try and provide some additional input and guidance and working with staff on how to provide a structure that kids will adhere to without screaming, "You can't take my cell phone away, I dare you." And that, I know that happens too, because we've heard from staff that have had to endure that. So I don't have an answer. I just have a support for having our kids, as you said, learn to be more responsible with the use of a cell phone that interferes with their education.
But before we have discussion, we would need a motion on the floor. So I was waiting for Ms. Robinson to say her piece, but before we actually discuss.
Yeah, I don't have a suggestion for whether or not to motion to bring it back up, or that I'm going to leave that to a different board member.
Just to get the ball rolling for discussion, I would like to motion that we direct staff to create some options for an AR regarding cell phone use to bring back to us.
I would have a request. I mean, it's nothing formal about it, but I would like to find out just how onerous our restriction could be? Can you prohibit them from campus, or does the ed code make it clear that a child is allowed to come onto campus with a cell phone turned off? Can you answer that right now, Madam Superintendent?
I believe we would have a hard time banning them completely because of the safety aspect. But I do believe that there's plenty of latitude once they are on campus that they have to remain off and out of sight and unavailable.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing those tough ones, all right? Thank you.
I'm going to second Mr. Landau's motion.
And do you have a sense of time frame? Anyone here think how quickly we can possibly move on this? Because I would like to move quickly personally.
Well, that, I would refer that back to staff in terms of how quickly you guys think you can get some possibilities up for us.
I believe, and not to overwork my staff's looking at me right now, but I believe we can have it ready for that, probably that first board meeting in June.
Okay.
June 12th, is that what it is?
That-
June 12th?
Okay.
So we can have something in place to start the school year?
I was going to comment on that. It seems like with such a drastic change for many students, it would make sense to, if we were to make changes, to do it with the new year, kind of a new, fresh start. It seems like it would be hard to roll out something earlier than that.
And at the same time, I'm not sure this needs to be part of the motion, just as kind of an idea I'd like to throw out there. Because the idea of this as a cultural solution is, I mean, the right one, right? Like, we're not gonna find, the underpouchers are a neat gag, but they're a technological solution for a cultural problem. But the other piece of that is, are we directly instructing our students? This is what we do, we teach kids. Are we teaching them about when and where cell phone use is appropriate and when and how it's dangerous? Are we looking at our technology and media literacy curriculums, especially in middle schools, to directly address that with the students?
You're looking at me, so I'll respond to it. I know other people can as well. I will say that like many other rules, policies, procedures that students they hear. For example, all three high schools, first week of school, go into every one of the 9th grade or recently enrolled classes and make sure that kids hear all the rules. They hear the expectations. Again, enforcement is still a whole different ballgame, right? So they hear them, they sign off on paperwork. But there's a difference between hearing and learning. And my own anecdotal gut feeling is we could triple that amount of opportunity for learning. I think that could definitely be more reinforced. I'll tell you, and there's a very similar pathway between the tardy policy that was established by Chico High School and Pleasant Valley High School about 9 years ago, and the training and information that needed to take place took place in August, and kids were trained by September. We still had people who were tardy. We still have people who are tardy. But there is a major emphasis on that issue, and there's consistent enforcement.
And then on a similar sort of looking at how we address things like cell phone use and computer use when we're training students in the PBIS stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. I got one more quandary. Should we potentially take the Yonder pouch off the table for consideration?
I don't know if that needs part of the motion. It's up to you guys. I mean, I don't think.
I mean,
It's pretty patently a bad idea, frankly.
I'm sorry, can you speak a little?
I said it's pretty patently a bad idea, so if we want to make that a formal part of the motion, I suppose, but.
I mean, I would be worried that it might absorb some conversation maybe in the community that doesn't need to be there. I mean, given the costs, I'm not prepared to support the idea of the Yonder pouch.
Seems like we can at least consider or attempt other options before going on that path.
I mean, agreed, the pouches don't. I mean, you Google Yonder pouch hack and you'll get infinite returns, and I'm sure at least one of them works.
There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. Yes.
So I don't know if we need to make that part of the motion so much as it seems like there's pretty clear direction up here that we'd like to look at the AR and how we can make that cultural and educational shift rather than, I mean, especially given that the Yonder pouches, if you had an emergency, they'd become a nightmare in terms of like, how do you unlock and who gets theirs unlocked, and it's just, again, the overhead in terms of cognitive load for teachers seems prohibitive.
I really like the idea also of just instilling some of the value with kids in them understanding the rationale behind this and sort of owning it rather than here's another way we're gonna micromanage, but having them embrace the purpose and the reasoning behind it.
I wanted to just state for the record that I disagree with about 75% of the board policy. So I'm actually not happy with the board policy the way it's written either. So I would request a board policy update and a AR to go with it. I don't know how we work that into the current motion or if I need to make a second motion. But I mean, we're in discussion anyway, so we can talk about it.
Do you have specifics? I mean, we
Yeah, if
could
you-
certainly
I don't
table
have my
this
cr-
motion.
Yeah,
if you
I
wanted
can,
to think about
I
that.
don't have my Chromebook on me, but if we could pull it back up, I'll just start from the beginning and I'll tell you what I want to redline. The governing board recognizes that the use of smartphones and other mobile communication devices on campus may be beneficial to student learning and well-being. I don't agree with that, but could be disruptive of the instructional program in some circumstances. I believe that it is disruptive of the educational program from the start of the bell to the finish of the bell. I strongly believe that cell phone access for students on campus are disruptive to their mental health and well-being and their focus on their academics and school culture. And that their access to phones during lunchtime or passing period or in the bathroom is taking away from their opportunities to learn and to develop their sense of self. So I disagree with that part of the sentence too. The board permits limited use of mobile communication devices on campus in accordance with the law and the following policy. The part that I agree with is following the law. I think that's the 25% of the policy that I agree with. Students may use cell phones, smartwatches, pagers, or other mobile communication devices on campus during non-instructional time as long as the device is utilized in accordance with law and any rules that individual school sites may impose. I think we need a district-wide policy. I think we need to have a policy that's uniform across all school campuses, which would set the expectation for an AR. I don't think I need to read the rest. I forget what's below. Scroll down a little bit, please. Yeah. Can't infringe on other people's personal rights, etc. I agree with that. Okay, yeah, the rest is kind of follows suit with what the original part said. I'm not going to read the rest out. Anyway, just my perspective and kind of where I stand on the issue is maybe extreme to some people, but I would support cell phones off and in backpacks from the beginning of the school day to the end of the school day for all students, TK through 12.
And I think that is going to need to be stated in the board policy in order for it then to be reflected in the AR. So you make an excellent point. Board policy is the what, and then the ARs are the how we do it. So we will need to make some changes, and we can make those recommendations for changes to the board policy and bring those back, but that power lies strictly with the board.
Mm-hmm. I said my piece in the briefest amount possible.
I concur with your point of view on that, Madam President.
Okay, just so I can be clear what staff is going to do prior to the June 12th board meeting is that we will go back and make some revisions that we would bring back to the board for approval to the board policy, and then align the administrative regulations to that board policy with the underlying intent being that there will be no cell phone use on campus, period, from the start of the school day to the end of the school day, unless, of course, it falls into those areas that are exempted by Ed Code.
So if I were to state a second motion, that would be what I would say, but the motion on the table is just to create an AR for the current board policy. So I put it to the original motioner if we want to amend or if I need to make a second motion.
That's significantly different. How about you just make a substitute motion?
Okay, that would be a substitute motion then.
I second.
Madam President?
Yes.
Does what we've just done
So for clarification, for anybody who isn't following the rapid fire, so the motion on the second motion, so a substitute motion on the table, is to direct staff to develop an updated district-wide board policy and administrative regulations setting clear expectations for no cell phone use from the beginning to the end of the school day, during lunch, anytime, including lunch, cellular devices on campuses, during regular school hours. And also to get input from staff, students, and families, please, on that, because we can always make adjustments, to some of those nuances. And that was seconded, and you still agree, by Member Conkin.
I would like to have an option of letting them use the phones during lunchtime.
I feel like we could either try to change it now. I disagree, so I'm not going to amend my motion, or we could discuss it when it does come back for approval in June. Especially getting input from staff and students and families. Any further discussion, board? Any further discussion? Okay, so we're gonna vote on the substitute motion. If it passes, then we won't go to the first motion, which was Mr. Lando's. If it does not pass, then we'll go to Mr. Lando's motion. I'll start since it was my motion. Dalby, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye.
Tennis, aye.
Conkin, aye.
It passes unanimously. Thank you, board. We will bring it back at the June meeting. I think whichever June meeting makes the most sense. I think as long as it's done in June would be good. Maybe the first June meeting would be better if we do need revisions, but you guys, I know, need time to kind of exercise all of that, so.
We'll bring it back for the June 12th, and then if there needs to be some revisions from the board, that'll give us the time to do that.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving right along. We're on item 4.1.2, discussion action for resolution number 1642-24, board compensation for missed meeting.
So we do have Ed Code that allows for monthly compensation for board members, but board members do have to be present at all of the meetings in order to receive the full stipend. It also allows for the board to approve an absence. So bringing this forward, we did have Mr. Tennis, due to a family situation, had to miss the April 17th board meeting. So this gives the board the opportunity to pass a resolution to excuse that absence.
Madam President. Oops, how do I keep doing that? Approval of resolution 1642-24.
I'll second. Point of clarification, does Mr. Tennis need to recuse himself from this vote?
You know, I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I would guess yes.
I'm going to choose to recuse regardless.
Thank you. Just want to be proper. We'll start with Ms. Conkin.
Conkin, aye.
Dalby, aye.
Lando, aye.
Robinson, aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, 4.1.3, discussion action for the July board meeting.
So for the last 2 years, the board has asked to not hold a board meeting in July to give both board and staff the month off so that there would be no more board meetings in July. So just bringing this forward to the board for consideration. Do you want to continue with that 2-year trend of not having a July board meeting, or if the board so chooses, we can have a July board meeting?
I think it's a wonderful family tradition, and we should keep doing it.
I did confirm too that if it seemed like we were okay with what we can get done in June and get back in August and hit the ground running. So it didn't sound like it was going to impede our ability to maintain.
Yeah, our July meeting is usually an organizational meeting where we determine board workshops and when those will occur and who the board liaisons are. So we can schedule that for our June meeting, or or if the board prefers to do so in August. June would be preferable to give more planning time.
So I think if we do pass this, then we just need to remember that in June that we'll be bringing those workshop ideas and liaison ideas and et cetera forward in June. I think last year I hadn't even really thought about it. We got here and I was a little panicked, and then we did it halfway and then finished in August, and there were some hiccups, and so just I'm saying it out loud just mostly for my benefit to remember that in June we'll have those conversations. Any further comments? Alrighty. Well, the last vote wasn't unanimous, so we're going to do a voice vote again. Sorry, do we have a motion first? Do we have a motion already? Okay. I move approval to cancel the July meeting.
Second.
All right. The motion was by Dalby, the second was by Tennis. Dalby, aye.
Hold up.
Oh, sorry. Discussion, sorry.
Real quick, I vote no against this every year. I'll do it again this year. I know everybody wants a break from prepping for board meetings, but also, you know, we all get paid to be here. We could get a lot of planning done. I think we can probably work our fancy vacations in around one more meeting.
Okay, before we vote then, you know, there is a heavy lift of a thing that I would love for our district to go in the direction of having a strategic plan, and this would be, that would be the time to really kind of start to iron that out. But since we're already towards the end of the school year, I don't think that's the route we're going this year. I don't think that we get compensation, at least stipends-wise, the board. The stipends don't get provided when we skip the July meeting, so we don't get a compensation in July. So, I mean, there's like $2,000 savings. But fair enough, fair point. If we did have something on deck that demonstrated that we needed that meeting, then we would definitely be having the meeting. But we don't have anything on deck because it hasn't been brought forward. So maybe that's something for the board to consider. Okay.
Are you still doing input?
Sure.
I have a concern because of what we're going to probably be dealing with as far as the state budget, and so I'm going to follow Tom on the not voting. I mean, I don't want to eliminate our July meeting this year.
Jacqueline, do you have input on that?
So the May revision of the governor's proposal comes out on or around May 15th. Sorry, Matt. So we'll use that information to put forth the kind of estimated budget for next year, and that'll come forward at both the June 12th and June 26th meeting. The state legislature then goes into a recess for a period of time, and I don't know the exact time, but I can get back to you. So trailer bill language typically related to the state budget doesn't even come out until August. So in July, there's not any new information because they're on recess that I'd be able to present to the board that may impact the budget that was already approved.
So really, you don't get your final budget until right before school starts?
Correct. With trailer bill language that changes it in August and September, yes.
You know, another option, and I'll add this in there, is that we ask the board and staff to make sure that we leave that date clear in case there is a need to meet. But, and I'll be bringing this up soon, if an emergency comes up or there's a situation that is pressing, we always have the ability to call a special board meeting. And there may be a need to do that. So not having the July board meeting scheduled does not prevent us from meeting if there is a need to meet.
I'll support that concept.
Are we ready to vote? Are we ready to vote? Okay. Dalby, aye.
Lando, nay.
Robinson, aye.
Tennis, aye.
Conkin, aye.
Okay, it passes 4-1. Item 5 is board member request to agendize an item. There are no requests at this time, so with that, we will move to closed session, and then we will adjourn after closed session is over.